Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
We are back.
Yes, we are back. And maybe Ezekiel's wheels are back.
Oh, perhaps.
Yeah. Very, very interesting when we start delving into some of the ancient stuff, from the biblical tales to things that are in evidence all around the globe.
Well, they wrote those stories down not because they felt like it, but because they witnessed it.
They experienced something,
Yes.
so what did they experience? And again, one of the things you got to realize is, most of the people, almost everyone, was totally illiterate back in those days. I mean, the vast majority of people just didn't have words. They didn't have vocabulary. They didn't have understanding. They didn't understand dimensions. They didn't understand flying vehicles, things along those things. They didn't understand traveling to the stars. They saw the lights out there, and some thought that they were just holes in the filament. Of course, we know much better than that now. That was the mindset of people when they didn't have any explanations for things. So, they just kind of made up stories. They conceived a possible explanation.
They absolutely did their very best to articulate what they were experiencing in ways that I guess people like them could understand.
Exactly. And this is, again, exactly why Jesus taught in parables. And the Upanishads out of the Indus Valley, those are also, for the most part, parables. And that's a way to tell people truths and secrets and give them an understanding in a simple way that they can understand.
Well, something that's not going to harm their belief system, perhaps.
And so we see, again, another perhaps interpretation of Ezekiel's wheels. There are those that think that what he saw was nothing other than some sort of craft, some sort of spaceship.
Well, I kind of feel that too.
It could be, but it's interesting the way that he talks about them rotating, because it makes me think of a Merkaba, which in effect is a sort of craft. It's a vehicle that can take us in many different dimensions.
Yep.
And we could transverse tremendous distances instantaneously when the light body is fully activated.
And that ability is getting stronger in each of us.
Yes. And so, it's interesting to note this. We can see references in this picture to the Tree of Life and also to the Sri Yantra. Sri Yantra is the pattern of this matrix that we find ourselves in. And when the light body is fully activated, which will only come by once the Kundalini is completely activated as well and flowing freely up the spine, illuminating the third eye, let thine eye be single, and your body will be full of light. And that's a reference, again, to the pineal gland and Kundalini, as we have talked about. So in my mind, I think that he may have been seeing a vehicle, sure, but it could have been a Merkaba.
It sure could have.
And so when we look into other interesting little pieces of the Old Testament, by the day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so they could travel by day or night. And again, this is leading Moses, leading the people out of Egypt and to the promised land. So what exactly was that?
It's so hard to say.
This is an interesting little representation. Some have noticed too when Moses looks at the burning bush and it's on fire, and then of course somebody from the Islamic tradition would look at that and say, well, that's how a jinn would appear.
Right. Yep.
So exactly what were they being guided by? We've seen firsthand, Cindy and I have seen, and many of you probably have too, clouds that don't look normal and feel like they are cloaking something.
Oh my gosh, they so do. Yes.
We have seen that time and time and time again. Then we have this wonderful painting. And again, there's so many paintings from the Middle Ages, the dark times, the dark ages, that depict interesting lights in the sky in a UFO type of shape. And here you see it shooting something down. Where's it shooting that down to? Well, right into the crown chakra with a representation of the Holy Spirit. So you see Mary here, and this is, the Annunciation. And we also can see right here the Archangel Gabriel talking to a bishop or a religious official, and Mary receiving the Holy Spirit through the crown chakra and coming from a UFO. I love this photo. I mean, this painting is just amazing. It's marvelous. It's one of my favorites.
Well, and where would this person get this information if they hadn't witnessed something similar?
Well, secret societies. Many secret societies understand exactly what's going on. But, again, those truths are hidden to the secret societies. And they don't tell the public that. They let the public, view things as firmament instead of letting them know, hey, those are stars. There's planets around those. There's tons of them that are habitable. And in fact, the Earth itself has been visited by many interdimensionals and extraterrestrials.
Well, yeah, if we knew the truth, things would be different.
Well, we are, and we are discovering. And more people are awakening. And we see things like this, which, clearly, this is, again, ancient. Look at the depictions. Look at the boots. Look at the suit. Look at the helmet, the humanoid inside it. And, breathing apparatus is hooked up. It doesn't take hardly any imagination to see that. And we see this from, I believe this was from Mexico, somewhere in Central America, maybe Guatemala. But again, very ancient, clear depiction of somebody flying in a machine. And by the way, Comet C2020 M3, it had its closest approach yesterday.
Interesting.
And we see the Belt of Orion, which, coincidentally, the Great Pyramids align with, and other, actually, monuments on the Earth are inclined towards the Belt of Orion as well. And here's the comet flying by that area.
All a bunch of coincidences.
There's so many coincidences. So our brother Mark J, who I will insert a link once he sends me his link to his YouTube channel. I'll insert it here so you guys could go check out his channel, subscribe, and give him a thumbs up. He takes a lot of interesting pictures. He's actually had stuff put up on Mr. MBB's. So he sent me this, and this is Comet Atlas, and he was saying it's breaking up. And so he wanted to send me a photo of it. And let's see if we could get it over here. And he circled it. And, saw this and thought, well, that's interesting. Is it breaking up? The other thing is, too, this looks really kind of squarish, from this angle here. So, we took a look and, blowing it up, it's really weird. Now, I don't know if this is just some sort of strange artifact or what. Or is this? It might be just a light refraction. It could simply be a light refraction from perhaps two pieces here, because it does seem to be brighter over here and over here. But isn't it interesting how it kind of makes a square? Very, very curious. Now, again, this might be absolutely nothing. It could just be the refraction of the light, like we see with sundogs, and we see like up more towards the Arctic areas. Sometimes we'll see what looks to be many suns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just looks, I don't know, it feels kind of weird too.
Has a weird vibe. And again, I'm not saying that this is actually a square. It's just so curious the way it comes out. And so our good friend Raven, too, who has degrees in religious studies, philosophy, PhDs, he said exactly what I immediately thought, too. And so I'm going to share that with you guys. But, again, this is probably just some sort of refraction of light. But it got me, thinking about this curious passage in the Bible that talks about the New Jerusalem descending from the sky.
I remember that passage. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Because it's a square. It's actually a cube. And, who would make... you just don't think of a spaceship as being a cube shape. But who knows? Advanced technologies... They could probably do whatever they want. And it's just curious because when you read the passage, it does feel like it's a gigantic mothership coming out of the sky.
And what about all of these new processes and procedures they're putting into place as of recently?
Meaning?
Well, with the plague upon the land, and they're kind of getting people under control and perhaps wanting to, I can't even say the word, but...
Oh, I know where you're going.
Yes.
So you're going to what we're going to be talking about next. It's just a really curious passage. New Jerusalem comes descending from the sky. And according to the Bible, this is how big it would be. I mean, it would literally go from Jerusalem right to Rome. Isn't that a curious fact? That it's the size, exactly the size pretty much, that would take it from Jerusalem to Rome, and in a square pattern. So it would be all the way over in Libya, throughout Egypt, and heading on up into Europe. Wow, I mean, that's really pretty wild to think about. The Earth itself is 7,900 miles in diameter. And so, you see when you look at what they describe it, the city's exact dimensions are measured by an angel. Interesting, angel and angle.
Yep.
There's a lot of things in here that when people just look at things completely literally, maybe they're missing the picture, because there's so many different layers to the symbolisms. Like we've talked about this before when they talk about the 7 lampstands, the 7 cities. They're referring to the 7 chakras. And the references to 12 can refer also to our DNA and where we're going. There's so many different, there's so much symbolism there that's not completely understood when we just take things literally. If you just look at Revelation and you look at the dragon and the kings and the kingdom, and gosh, I remember listening to Hal Lindsey, back in the 90s. That's how long ago I was listening to it and listening to all their literal interpretations, which I feel is exactly what many would want. I think the powers that be want you to kind of take things that way, because then we're missing the bigger picture here. So the exact dimensions are measured by an angel, and reported to be 12,000 stadia, which is equivalent to 1,400 miles or 2,200 kilometers in length, width, and height. So even though these proportions may have a symbolic importance, doesn't mean they can't be literal. And this is out of epm.org. So it's just fascinating to look at this. And, that gets you thinking of something more modern day, which I think Cindy was alluding to. Star Trek and the Borg. A perfect cube as we see it catching the Enterprise in its tractor beam. Again, a perfect cube over the Earth. Interesting. This reeks of AI, does it not? As we see, Picard becoming part of the Borg here.
I will not assimilate.
Right? That's exactly what, Cindy is getting towards. It's interesting that we have all these different things that we could look back on, put the pieces together. And of course, we are reading today things about how things may never get back to normal, along those lines, and travel restrictions, and perhaps maybe even, you won't be able to even go food shopping or go to school, or unless you assimilate to the Borg. So that is what we're being faced with, and very curious references. And, I can't help but think of New Jerusalem when we see this Borg, because, the symbolism is kind of right there in our faces. Very, very interesting times we live in.
Oh my gosh, they are very curious.
So guys, as always, thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. God bless, keep your eyes on the skies, and namaste.
Namaste.